Hello, honors algebra students. Mr. Lawrence here, and I got to tell you, I had a lot of fun on the Google Meet. That was pretty cool. I wish I could figure out a way where I could share my screen with you, and that way I wouldn't have to hold things up for you, but that's okay. Still was pretty cool. I loved everybody's sense of humor. You guys are awesome. All right, so this is for the people that didn't get front-loaded, or even if you did get front-loaded. Here is factoring by grouping. Now, this is how we do it when there are 4 and sometimes even 6 terms. You're not going to see a 6-term polynomial very often, but it can work the same way. You'll just have 3 groups. What I'm going to do is I'm going to break up my 4-term polynomial here into 2 groups. Now, sometimes I'll group the first 2 together and the second 2 together, but I don't have to. My whole point in grouping together is making sure I'm getting a GCF in almost every case. There's kind of a weird exception. So I'm going to group these first 2 together because I do see a GCF. And I'm going to group these 2 together, but I'm going to be careful. I'm going to make sure I grab the sign with that third term and then put a plus sign in there. Okay, it's very important you do that. You got to grab that negative because it belongs to the 5x. You can't just turn it into a subtraction problem and put a parenthesis there like that. Okay, so don't do that. All right, so now all I'm going to do is I'm going to GCF 3 times. Yeah, that's all grouping is GCFing 3 times. Okay, so first time is I'm going to GCF this first group. Looks like the GCF is 3y. So I'm going to factor out a 3y, and then I'll be left with an x minus 7. Now here, I'm going to factor out a negative 5. How do I know to do a negative 5? Well, look at my signs. In the first group, I've got a positive, then a negative. The second group, I've got a negative, then a positive. I want them to be in the same order. So I'm going to factor out a negative 5, and I'll be left with an x minus 7. Now, that's 2 GCF things right there. I did 1, right? I pulled out a 3y from the first group, and then I pulled out a negative 5 from the second group. Okay, now, if you look here, I've got 2 factors, 3y and x minus 7, 3y, x minus 7 as a quantity. And then here I have a 5 and an x minus 7. Did you hear me repeat myself? Yeah, I said the same factor twice. I said the quantity of x minus 7. That makes it a GCF. So I'm going to factor out an x minus 7. That's my third GCF. When I factor it out from here, I'm left with a 3y. And when I factor it out from here, I'm left with a negative 5. And there you go. We're done. We've just finished factoring. Okay, so let's try number 2. I'll model this one for you, and then I'll give you a couple to try. All right, on this one, I think I'm going to change the order. I think it makes more sense to me to do 8mn squared plus 15 minus 24mn minus 5m. Those numbers just seem to jump out at me and go together better. By the way, I could have done it with the first 2 and the second 2 because they do have GCF, but this one made more sense to me. So I'm going to group these 2. I'm going to group these second 2, but again, grabbing the negative and putting a plus in between. All right, so I'm going to GCF. I'm going to pull out, let me see, it looks like it's going to be I don't see a GCF. I guess that was a poor idea. I shouldn't have grouped them in that way. But you know what? Let me see what's going to happen. Let me just ignore this first group for a second. And let's see what's going to happen. No, nothing's going to happen. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that work and go ahead and group them the other way. Yeah, I kind of fooled myself there, thinking I saw something that I didn't. All right. Did I write that down wrong? Hold on a second. I did write that down wrong. Okay. Let me try it this way. Let's do the 8m squared n, and let's subtract 24mn from it. And then I'll have a negative 5m plus a 15. Oh, I see some GCFs now. So I'm going to group these first 2, group these second 2, grab that sign, put a plus sign in between. So my GCF of the first quantity is definitely going to be an 8mn. And I'll be left with an m minus a 3, right? And in the second group, I'm going to factor out a negative 5, And that will leave me with an m minus a 3. Did you hear me repeat myself? M minus 3. I'm going to factor out the m minus 3. And then I will have an 8mn minus a 5. And there we go. It is factored. Now it would work this very similarly if I would have grouped these two and these two. It would have behaved very much the same way. Okay, so there's not necessarily a wrong way to do it unless you simply can't find a GCF at all. All right, go ahead and try numbers 3 and 4. Pause the video, see how you do on them, and then I'll go ahead and show you my solutions. All right, I'm getting ready to show you my answers. Please make sure you've tried 3 and 4 on your own. Okay, first of all, I'm going to group like this. And my first GCF, the GCF of the first quantity is going to be a 3h cubed, leaving me with a 2h plus 3. Okay, and then I'm going to factor out a 6h from the second group. That's going to leave me with a 2h plus 3. I'm going to have a quantity of 2h plus 3 times a quantity of 3h cubed plus 6h. Hopefully you're not done, because guess what? There's a GCF in this group. It looks like there's a 3h. That's a common factor. I'm going to bring that 3h out front, and then I'll have an h squared plus 2. And now it's completely factored. Notice I didn't leave that 3h in between the two quantities. That monomial I put out front of the binomials. Okay, it's easier on the reader. All right, if you haven't tried 4 yet, go ahead and try it now. Let's see here. I'm going to group these two, group these two. You might have noticed that when the third term is positive, grabbing that sign isn't as important, but I get in the habit of doing it so that I don't ever make a goofy mistake. All right, looks like the GCF of my first quantity is going to be a 2q cubed, leaving me with a 2q minus a 5. And the GCF of the second quantity looks like it's going to be an 8q, leaving me with a 2q minus a 5. And then I'll have a 2q minus 5 to factor out, and a 2q cubed plus 8q. That sounds like a tongue twister. And look at that, there's a GCF hiding in there. Looks like it's a 2q times the quantity of a 2q minus 5 times a q squared plus 4. And there we go. All right, that's it for the video, ladies and gentlemen. Remember, I'll have office hours from 11 to 12 every day. Of course, you can still make comments on the Google Classroom. I'll see them, I'll get notifications, and I might get back to you sooner. If you're really having trouble, maybe I can do a Google Meet with just you or you and a friend and explain a little more kind of in person. But anyway, this should be pretty easy stuff. All right, Mr. Lawrence signing off. Stay healthy, everybody.